This is Istanbul. Everyone says that this city is a bridge between worlds, between East and West, Europe and Asia. A place where civilizations meet. But the deeper I looked into its history, the more the simple version of this story fell apart. Something felt wrong. So I came here with one simple question. Is Istanbul still the bridge it claims to be? Or is it just a myth? Let's find it out. To understand what Istanbul has become, we first need to understand what it was in the past. And what it was is just extraordinary. For more than 1,500 years, this was the capital of three empires: the Roman Empire, then the Byzantine Empire, and later the Ottoman Empire. Each empire left layers, traces of their existence, religions, languages, institutions, urban structures, and communities. And that's why Istanbul is clearly a place built by different civilizations, one on top of the other. And it's easy to see all the different layers of this city's history while exploring it. This is Balat. Historically, this was a Jewish and Greek neighborhood. Under the Ottomans, Istanbul wasn't diverse because everyone mixed together. It was diverse because different communities lived separately under one imperial system. Muslims, Christians, Jews, they lived side by side, but separately. Each had its own neighborhoods, its own institutions, its own leaders. Historian Karen Barkey, in her book Empire of Difference, explains that the Ottoman system was built on what she calls a negotiated empire, a political system with constant flexibility and adaptation, where different communities negotiated different arrangements with the Sultan. The empire didn't impose uniformity, it was pragmatic and it organized difference. There wasn't spontaneous multiculturalism, it was all organized from above. The Ottoman Empire developed mechanisms for managing difference rather than trying to eliminate it like other empires tried to do. In this sense, the Ottomans implemented the millet system, which was the administrative framework used by the empire to let non-Muslim religious communities to govern internal affairs, marriage, inheritances, education, disputes, etc. Their community leaders acted as intermediaries between these communities and the Sultan. This way, diversity was not integrated horizontally, but vertically. Many people, when examining the reality of Istanbul at the time, might have concluded that the city was very open, multicultural, even cosmopolitan. However, things are not that simple. Cosmopolitanism is often defined as the philosophical and political ideology that promotes the idea that all human beings belong to a single universal community, sharing moral and political obligations that go beyond administrative and national borders. But when analyzing the case of Istanbul, we can already see that this concept does not exactly match reality. This system actually looked like cosmopolitanism from the outside, multiple religions, languages, and communities living in the same city. But here's what's critical to understand. This cosmopolitan multi-ethnic system required an empire, or rather, it required one major dominant power holding everything together. As historian Eldem points out, in Istanbul there wasn't a spontaneous cultural blending during the Ottoman Empire. It was elite, hierarchical, structured, often exclusionary. Multiple communities coexisted in organized separation, and Muslims had more privileges and rights than the other non-Muslim communities, called Timis. And these communities only had this certain degree of autonomy, as long as they remained loyal to the Sultan and paid their extra taxes. So the romantic vision of harmonious blending was, in fact, not real. And the multicultural diversity of the city was tied to the Sultan's will, who could get rid of this diversity at any moment. It was a tool to maintain order and preserve stability in the territory, a pragmatic system of diversity management that required imperial power to maintain. And because of that, when the empire fell in 1922, the system also collapsed. More than 1 million Armenians were killed in the genocide of 1915. The Greeks were expelled from the new republic with the compulsory population exchange of 1923. The wealth tax disproportionately targeted non-Muslim citizens in 1942, and the Greeks, Armenians, and Jews that still remained in Istanbul were victims of the pogrom that took place in Istanbul in 1955. And not just focusing mainly on Istanbul, because in the rest of the country, the Greeks, Kurds, Jews, and Assyrians were also victims of the late Ottoman genocides and ethno-nationalist massacres and pogroms that occurred during the first half of the 20th century throughout the whole country. After that, only the buildings and artworks of those communities remained. The people, gone. Most of them gone. And with them, all the romantic visions of cosmopolitanism of the capital.
So when people say that Istanbul is a bridge between civilizations, they're usually talking about an Istanbul, a past Istanbul, that no longer exists. So now the question is, what replaced it?
This is Istiklal Avenue, one of Istanbul's most famous streets. Over 3 million people walk it every day. A place that looks like so many others, full of well-known transnational brands, services and products which are also present almost everywhere in the world. An avenue brimming with diversity, with almost no space for local businesses.
This is where theory meets reality, because what we're seeing here is not the old Ottoman cosmopolitanism, but rather something entirely else, and this is globalization.
And because of this phenomenon, cities around the world are becoming more economically integrated, looking more and more alike. Urban sociologist Saskia Sassen explained that as global capitalism connected cities economically, they became nodes in a global economic network. Same brands, same functions, same inequality patterns. With globalization, economic activity is increasingly disconnected from the national territory, so to speak. Housing services and products that help transnational corporations operate and grow. What she calls global cities become nodes in this global network, providing similar services and products, and this way, they resemble more with each other than with other urban settlements of the same country.
And that's what this is. Istiklal Avenue could be Brussels, could be Barcelona, could be New York, could be anywhere. Same brands, same aesthetic, same Instagram spots.
So, here's the paradox. In an age where every major city markets itself as cosmopolitan, where every city has American fast food, Japanese sushi restaurants, Italian fashion stores, in this context, what does cosmopolitan even mean anymore? We now have diversity of products and services, rather than diversity of cultures, especially in a world where polarizing and even aggressive, discriminatory nationalisms are increasingly dominant, and diversity is seen as something dangerous for these groups. And as Will Kimlicka and Catherine Walker explain, cosmopolitanism has to be rooted in local identity. It has to be grounded in specific local identities and communities. Otherwise, abstract, placeless cosmopolitanism becomes empty, meaningless.
But when globalization makes every city look the same, where's the local supposed to be rooted? Because that's something that globalization did. Rather than fostering cosmopolitanism, it created homogenization.
And that's one of the challenges that Istanbul is currently facing, like so many other cities in the world. But it is not the only one. Because while one part of Istanbul is being absorbed in this global network of sameness, another transformation is taking place in another part of the city, one that tourist brochures don't mention. This is Fatih, a district in Istanbul's historical peninsula, and in the last decade it has become a de facto home to thousands of Syrians looking to start a new life. Here, visitors can eat Damascene shawarmas, buy Syrian products, and find lots of shops adorned with signs in Arabic. This way, part of the district of Fatih has become the so-called Little Syria. Since 2011, following the Syrian civil war, over 540,000 registered Syrian refugees, approximately, have settled in Istanbul. That's around 3.4% of the city's entire population, 16 million people. And they are not temporary. They are actually rebuilding their lives here. But this is not only about refugees. This is also part of a larger shift. Aside from being a global city, Istanbul is also becoming a hub for the Muslim world. Turkey itself is increasingly looking eastward to its old sphere of influence during the Ottoman Empire. And as part of this process, Istanbul has become sort of beacon of safety for persecuted people across the Muslim world. And the Syrian refugees are proof of that. Thanks to Turkey's generous visa system and Istanbul's location as a transport hub, whose airport has become the most connected in the world, it is easier for families scattered across the world to meet in Istanbul than elsewhere. And the city has 2 million Arabs who have opened coffee shops, bookstores, theater and media companies, and joined the staff of universities. In this sense, Istanbul is also becoming a center for Islamic education and religious networks, connecting Muslim communities from the Middle East, Central Asia, Europe, and North Africa. And all this isn't accidental, it's policy. Turkey's government has explicitly positioned Istanbul as an alternative to traditional Islamic centers like Egypt Al-Azhar. The Presidency of Religious Affairs, the Diyanet, now operates in over 40 countries, providing Islamic education, building mosques, training imams. Its former chief, Mehmet Görmez, said back in 2016 that it's become the Diyanet of all Muslims, not just Turkey's. And this is key for understanding the importance of the bridge metaphor. For decades, Turkey looked west at Atatürk's secular republic, the European Union membership dreams, hence the bridge between East and West narrative. But since the 2000s, Turkish foreign policy shifted. Less Europe, more Middle East and Muslim world. And Istanbul reflects that shift. So this is what replaced the Ottoman Istanbul and the misnamed Ottoman cosmopolitanism, a city composed of multiple layers adjacent to each other, multiple cities coexisting at the same time. Tourist Istanbul, globalized Istanbul, religious Istanbul, refugee Istanbul, and a large etc. All of them coexisting, which brings us back to the original question. Is then Istanbul a bridge between worlds? The answer is not a simple yes or no. It is, as you've seen so far, way more complex. If you're asking whether the Ottoman millet system that we've mentioned before is still a reality, no. That died a century ago along with empire. If you're asking whether it's Atatürk's secular western-facing bridge to Europe, well, that's a no as well, because that project stalled more than a decade ago, and both Turkey and Istanbul are now looking to other horizons. And if you're asking whether Istanbul is some romantic meeting point where East and West blend harmoniously, living the cosmopolitan dream, well, that was always a myth, as we've seen. A narrative that was part of a marketing strategy to sell abroad in order to get closer to the European membership dream. However, a single visit to Istanbul is enough to make you realize that Istanbul is a bridge, just not the one everyone imagines. For hundreds of thousands of people fleeing war in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Istanbul is a crossing point, a bridge towards safety, a place to survive, to regroup and reconnect with family and friends, to rebuild their lives and imagine a new future. For Muslim communities worldwide, Istanbul is a bridge connecting different Muslim networks, a religious, educational and cultural hub for the Muslim world. For European and American tourists, Istanbul is a bridge into a Muslim world they don't know. For many, even the first real encounter with a Muslim majority city, a threshold between fear and familiarity, between stereotypes and reality. For the international elites and transnational companies, a bridge to new markets, a strategic node connecting Europe, Middle East and Central Asia, a global city in every sense of the term. So yes, Istanbul is a bridge for many people, but not a single one, not a harmonious one, and not a romantic bridge we may imagine. The metaphor is not false or wrong, it's just incomplete and cannot be conceived in essentialist terms. It is not black or white. It's a city of crossings that don't always meet, of movements that overlap without blending, of worlds that coexist, negotiate, and sometimes collide. A place whose crossings aren't always harmonious, but often contested and negotiated. And this is particularly true in a globalized world where all the spheres, from the local to international, are deeply intertwined. That's the reason why cosmopolitanism has become such a controversial term, because the word itself has been stretched so far by globalization that it barely tells us anything anymore. When every city is global, connected and diverse in some way, what does cosmopolitan even describe now? It makes the term feel meaningless, emptied of meaning, almost dead.
So if cosmopolitanism is dead, and the bridge metaphor is mostly marketing, like in most global cities, what does Istanbul tell us about cities today?
I think Istanbul tells us a necessary truth that we should not forget. Cities aren't unified symbols that mean the same thing to everyone. They are negotiated spaces, places that brim with metaphors, stories, and memories from a vast array of factors. Places shaped by history, power, migration, capital, and beliefs, constantly redefined by the people who pass through them and the people who stay. Istanbul has unique layers: Roman, Byzantine, Ottoman, Republican Turkish, and now global. But it's also affected by the same forces reshaping every city: migration, capital flows, tourism, religious networks, political groups, etc. Like in all cities, it is a place where different actors, refugees, tourists, global companies, digital nomads, religious communities, local residents, local businesses live, compete, and negotiate over what the city should be, each with their own idea of what Istanbul should be. In this globalized world we live in, Istanbul is distinctly particular and inescapably global, and all these tensions between local identity and global forces, between different visions of what Istanbul should be, I think that's not the problem to solve, because I think that is what cities are: places with ongoing and constant negotiations between actors with different interests and tools. That's why I think the main question isn't whether cities are cosmopolitan, it's whether we're willing to accept that cities are messy, contested, and unfinished, that no single metaphor will ever capture them fully. What Istanbul reveals isn't a lost golden age of cosmopolitanism, and it isn't a model for the future either. It reminds us of the essence of cities and their eternal struggles, places shaped by constant negotiation, by arrivals and departures, by tensions that never fully disappear, living spaces defined by the people who inhabit them and by the struggles, compromises, and contradictions that come with living together. And that means better futures depend not on what the city is, but on what the people within it choose to become. Thanks for watching, consider subscribing for more content, and have a nice day. Peace.